Okay, so I guess thank you everyone for joining us here. First of all, I would like to thank the esteemed panelists who agreed to join us, Will, Adam, and Onika, for giving us their time and sharing their perspectives. I'm sure, like me, every one of you who is here and who have joined us through Zoom are really looking forward to their perspective. And then I definitely, because I want to thank the organizing team in the very beginning, because at the very end, we are always finishing up. So Russell, Daniel, and Yazan, a big shout out. I think they did most of the groundwork. And again, without further ado, get your pizzas, get a Coke or Pepsi, whatever you're holding, and let's get started. So the way we have organized the seminar is that we'll have 15-minute introduction from each of the panelists here. And then at the end, the last 15 to 20 minutes is going to be again a panel discussion. We want the audience both on Zoom as well as in person to engage with the panel. Russell will be moderating that panel, taking your questions and giving it to the panelists, as well as Daniel, who is looking at the Zoom chat, will take some questions and probably put it to the panelists also. So looking forward to all the perspectives. And again, thank you so much, Anika, Will, and Adam for doing this. So yes, let's get started, guys. So Yazan here will take forward with the first part of the session.
Awesome. Thanks everyone thank you everyone for joining us. We have much better. Thanks everyone for joining us. Today we're joined by three amazing speakers. Really grateful that they've agreed to come speak to us about their experiences. We're joined by William Braff, Adam Olnikowski, excuse me if I butcher that, and Annika Steele. William Braff graduated from Grace Hopper in 2005 with a Bachelor of Science in Physics. He holds a PhD in Mechanical Engineering from MIT too. As the battery material and cell engineering manager in Apple Special Projects Group, Will leads the development of new lithium-ion battery chemistry and design concepts. He lives in Palo Alto, and he has 3 young children. It's adorable. Annika Steele, she graduated from Yale with an ABAT accredited BS in EE in 2015. So if you have any questions about ABAT, be sure to ask her. She has since held 2 roles at Microsoft. The first is a product engineer with Microsoft devices in the new product introduction group, and her current role as an AI hardware engineer in the Azure hardware architecture group. She earned her master's in electrical engineering in 2021 from Stanford while working at Microsoft. And then last but not least, Adam Wolnikowski. Adam graduated in 2021, so he's fresh out of Yale. He majored in electrical engineering and CS. While at Yale, he published research on hardware security and networking with professors Jacob Scheffer, Robert Soule, and Rajat Monohar, for which he's received the CS Department Undergraduate Research Prize. After Yale, he worked as an embedded systems engineer at Humetex, a robotics startup, and recently began a new position as a software engineer at Endura, a defense startup. Adam, Will, Annika, thank you so much for joining us. I was wondering if you can start with William. Do you have any slides that you can tell us? I was wondering if you can tell us more about what a day in the life looks like for you, more about yourself, your background, and yeah, just take it out if you have any slides.
I'd be happy to take it out, and first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's an honor to get a chance to talk with some current Yale folks, so I appreciate that. I didn't make any slides. It just so happens my employer gets very uncomfortable about written communications for these kinds of things. But I hope that I can at least tell you a little bit about a day in the life at within my group at Apple anyway, and maybe a little bit of background about myself. As Yazan mentioned, I'm the materials and cell engineering manager within Apple Special Projects Group. So basically I work on batteries, and you guys hear a lot about batteries in the news, and all this sort of, it's like a hot area, right? It's very exciting. I think the reality of any particularly R&D group, but I think it's true for new product introduction groups too, is that it's always a blend of hard and soft skills. So you can jump from a meeting where you're like debating something extremely technical, it could be a fluids issue or heat issue or electrochemical issue, or you name it, right over to a meeting where you were arguing about who gets access to what machine on Thursdays, and that's, to me, that's what I think working at a large company is about. It's this weird overlap of like interpersonal relationships, and then just being a good engineer and doing your work. What I found, I guess I'm the resident old guy on the panel, which is a great honor. What I found is that throughout my career, I guess I've been doing this now almost 20 years, is that over time you end up doing less of the technical and more of the interpersonal. But you always have to have that technical background too. So for me, I spend a lot of time helping younger engineers talk through their projects. So they've got their data, they've done their experiments, they're really excited to do X, Y, and Z next, and they're not so sure about A, B, and C. And so, a big chunk of my role is one is advising them, like helping them to say, yeah, that's really promising. You should consider that, and maybe trying to figure out what's around the corner. Like if it goes well, what's going to happen next? Can you get that started sooner? And also trying to steer them away from things that are like maybe dead ends, or like, don't waste your time on that department. Like they're not going to help you. Like go figure it out yourself. So there's that kind of support role. The other thing that, if you stick around a place long enough, is you end up growing managers yourself. And that's a really rewarding experience too, where you help people on your team to help newer members of the group. So, day in life at Yale, at Apple, it's kind of a unique place because, you have this enormous company. So you have all the kind of annoying bureaucracy of a big company, but you have these amazing resources, amazing engineers. And so there's a huge upside there too. I see Annika nodding along with Microsoft. It's probably very similar. So, for me, it's been a very rewarding place to work. The only other thing I'll say, it's probably, I don't want to waste anyone's time going through all the things that lead from, leaving Yale in 2005 to, being here with you today. But one thing that always impressed me at Yale was that people were so organized and so such good planners. And I always felt that I was never such a good planner. When I finished Yale, I went and took a teaching fellowship in England because I just didn't know what to do. Like I thought I was going to be a physics PhD. But when I really got down to it, I realized that I didn't really want to be a physics PhD. I didn't want to go straight into grad school. So I took a very circuitous path through like a lot of different places before I kind of settled into my home, which was what I do now. And I think that if you know what you want to do and you're that person, like it's such a great thing. But I want to caution, if there's anyone in the audience who doesn't quite feel that way yet, like it's okay. It's a long road. And it's better to be sure before you kind of start down it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Will. That was really insightful. Annika, you can take it away. Can you tell us more about your life since graduating from Yale, what working at Microsoft is like, and what a day in your life looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually did prepare some slides. Let me see if I can share them. They're mostly pictures. I can. Actually, can I present as, share screen, there we go. Let me see if I can present. Let's see if this works. And then, okay, can everyone see this? Now, I'm not sure if I present it, I will probably lose the notes. That's okay. Okay, I'll just share these. The pictures kind of walk you through. So I want to kind of talk about the career journey because I think as a recent alum, there are several experiences that I've had that I think people in the audience might be, currently making decisions about, and it might be helpful to hear about how I approached those decisions, and maybe it'll help inform what you do as well. So actually I'm going to start with the first internship that I had, as well as how I got into engineering, which was through John Deere. So I had an internship right after high school with John Deere. It showed me a little bit more about what engineering was like. It was helpful. It kept me in the EE major because there was always a job waiting. I think it got me into electrical engineering, and but I really stayed with electrical engineering because it opened up a lot of doors. I ended up becoming a little pretty interested in finance, and electrical engineering is something that makes you quantitative. And so a lot of the finance people actually really like electrical engineers because you can think about numbers. Now, kind of fast forward, I want to talk a little bit about what did I do during those the summers at Yale. So after my freshman year, I did another internship with John Deere. After my sophomore year, I did a study abroad in Brazil. And then junior year was very serious because that's the summer you typically intern with some company or some group to try to figure out what you're going to do after Yale. And so for that summer, I was very prepared, doing a lot of shopping around with a lot of finance groups, because that's what I was very interested in. So I had lots of resumes, handing out like Halloween candy at all these events. And then one day was walking through the CEID. We were just unwinding with a friend after a test, and I happened upon a Microsoft recruiter. Now, she was not there for the double E's, I believe. She was more there for the CS majors, but she did say they had some electrical engineering positions. And so I handed her my resume. It was really helpful to have those resumes printed out. And later I got a call from them asking for an internship. And so one thing led to another, or interview. So one thing led to another. I got the interview. They flew us out to Seattle. It was a really fun interview experience. They drove us in a party bus to like lab tours, and they had us meet the team, and everyone was really nice. People really cared about the experience you wanted to have. So ultimately it won me over, and I decided not to go the banking route that I was planning on. And I had the internship with Microsoft with the team. I was actually that was my first job, which was a product engineer. It was a very satisfying experience, and I think it was really great because it allowed me to focus on classwork senior year, and I didn't have to worry about the job because I already had one lined up. Now, actually, that last part of senior year, I want to talk about one experience that I had that really influenced a later career decision. Give a shout out to the computer architecture class at Yale. At the time, it was taught by Jakob Zephyr. I think he might still be teaching it. It was a really great class. And one thing that he did that I really liked was he'd bring in industry speakers, people almost kind of like what we're doing right now, which is, alums. And one of the people he brought in was named Doug Berger. He was from Microsoft, and he gave some talk, I believe, about FPGAs, which is what I do now. And so I was able to make a connection with him, hear about what he had to say. And I said, hey, I'm also going back to Microsoft. So it was kind of a nice touch point, and I got to learn about what his group at Microsoft did. So save that thought for later. I returned back to Microsoft after senior year, and I worked on all these lovely products. So the Surface Studio and the Pro X and the Pen and the HoloLens and all of these different products. I had the wonderful experience to work on. And so my personal role, I was a product engineer, and the role of a product engineer is to scale from one to many. So I worked in manufacturing to improve our yield quality so that we could produce better, more quality products. So ultimately, what I think it would be useful to kind of hear what was the day in the life like with Microsoft as a product engineer. So it involved when I was in Redmond, I would spend a lot of time talking through issues with different groups. So actually a lot of, I can understand, you know, what William was saying. There's a lot of cross-disciplinary understandings and learnings that need to be done in a large company. And this was no different. Like, you know, you'd be talking to the, you know, RF team or the mechanical team or electrical reliability. There's many different groups. You would, you know, talk to them to learn what the issues are, and, you know, you resolve them. And there's a lot of data analysis involved. So overall, very fun. Learned a lot about the whole device. I also learned that communication skills are really important. So I really enjoyed reading nonfiction, and that's why I have these books posted here. They're two classics, and they're probably the two that influenced me the most during this time period. And I found them really valuable because sometimes in college, you know, you don't have time to learn everything. And these were books I found very important in helping me communicate and do my job better. Ultimately, though, I think in manufacturing, you end up learning that a lot of problems you see are things that, you know, you could also fix in the development phase. So I became more interested in working as in the development kind of sector next. And so that was something I pinned as, okay, that's something I'm curious about. I'd like to try that next. To that end, I decided to enroll in a part-time master's program with Stanford. To kind of give you an overview of what that was like. I chose to do part-time because I could still get the Microsoft experience, continue to work, all the benefits associated with that. Microsoft actually has a benefit where they would pay $10,000 a year towards your classes. And yeah, just continuing to work. And I enjoyed that. I liked my team. So of course the cons, there's pros and cons to everything. If you do choose to go part-time, it also means you get less of the in-class experience. It's a little bit, maybe, you know, it's remote. So, and it's also difficult to balance. You're working full-time and then you go home, you know, at night and do more schoolwork. And that can be difficult. But ultimately, I think if you are looking at a grad program after college, you know, you're looking to do part-time or full-time, it really just comes down to what are your goals and what are your preferences. So I don't know, after that, as the program was kind of nearing its end, I thought, okay, I feel like I'm well equipped at this point to go to this next role that I'm interested in. And so I kind of shopped around Microsoft, looking at what they had available. I really liked Microsoft. I liked Seattle. I wanted to stay there. I pictured this book because it is one of the books I read early on after college, and it really changed how I think about AI and just a lot of the cool innovations that are going on there. I really like this author, Jeff Hawkins. He has a lot of great things to say. So that book got me interested in this field, but as a hardware engineer, I didn't know what could I do that would get me into this. And while shopping around looking for jobs, I found there was a team in Bing that was advertising for, you know, an FPGA engineer that would work on AI hardware. And so I thought that was really interesting. Did a little bit more research on their background, and it led me back to Doug Berger, so who had presented at Yale so long ago. So ultimately, I ended up talking to that team and ended up landing on the team that I'm on now, which is I actually report up through Doug Berger. And it's in the Azure hardware group. So I work on AI hardware now. And I just want to, you know, give a little bit of, you know, what a day in the life is like there, and why I find this so exciting. So I think for myself, the top reasons I'm in the group that I'm in now are, you know, one, the people. Like William said, in a big company, you have access to a lot of really great resources. And I'd say the top one is, you know, it's not even a resource, just the people they're so brilliant and they teach you something new every day and they're inspiring. I think that is definitely my top reason for being there. I'd say second is purpose. There's a great sense of purpose for me in building the tools of the future and, you know, discovery and learning and all the things we'll be able to use these tools to do. There's something that drives me to come to work every day. The third thing is learning. You know, in engineering, you're just constantly invited to learn, solve new problems. And finally, I just think that I just want to put in a plug for computer architecture itself, it being a really cool set of problems to get involved in. This is a classic paper by Hennessy and Patterson called "A New Golden Age for Computer Architecture." I encourage you to read it. It's pretty easy to find through a search online. And ultimately, I think it's a really fun field. So, you know, what's a day in the life look like for me right now? You know, this is kind of a stock picture of a programmer. I thought it was funny because it doesn't really look like this, but kind of sometimes. So, you know, I spend a lot of my day, you know, writing code. There are fewer meetings than in my previous team, which for me is something that I'm okay with and I like. And I get to focus and, you know, produce something that I find personally really valuable. I also put a picture of this book here because I thought it was really useful. Something I did before I took on this new job was to analyze what I did in my daily life and find what gave me energy. This book is a really good guide on how to do that. And I discovered I really did like programming. I liked getting into that flow state and, you know, producing something meaningful. So again, this, you know, take that day in the life with a grain of salt. I love it. It wouldn't be for everyone, but it personally is fulfilling to me. So finally, you know, if there are a few takeaways from my career journey I want to pass on. First of all, you know, I've put a lot of pictures of books in these slides because I think they're really important and they've been the top influencer for me for what do I want to do next, or how do I communicate with people? How do I, you know, all these questions that I've had, they're all things that other people have answered before, and you just need to go look for the information. It's written down and it's always inspiring and useful. And the second thing is really just to know yourself. I really think that success is a matter of living your values and being happy with, you know, what you're doing, or not even happy, but like sad, like feeling like you're living your purpose. This is kind of a concept I would encourage you to look at if you haven't heard of it before, but it's the concept of an ikigai, which is kind of a Japanese word for like your purpose or your reason for being. A really good concept to think about when you look at what you want your career to be. And so that's it. That's my career journey, and I'll pass it over to Adam.
Thank you, Annika. That was great. Thank you for the beautifully put presentation as well. I think a lot of people here find your experience very, very inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of the audience members are going to have some questions about your experience, especially juggling grad school and work. But before we get into that, Adam, the floor is yours. I want to hear more about your Yale experience, what your year after graduation has been like, and what a day in the life looks like for you.
Yeah, thank you. Like you said, I graduated 11 months ago, so I feel massively underqualified to be giving anybody any kind of career advice. But hopefully I could, you know, the flip side of that is I can speak to some more recent experiences at Yale that people might be able to take advantage of. So yeah, I mean, I'll start with my time at Yale. I came in essentially being pretty set on the EECS major. I'd done a lot of robotics in college, and that kind of had really started my passion for CS. I never really wanted to work on like really ephemeral software that disappears into the cloud. I really liked the kind of hands-on debugging with an oscilloscope, seeing things move after you write a line of code. Like that always really spoke to me. And so to that end, I really enjoyed both CS 323 and EE 348, I think, digital systems. They, like, you know, I really took a liking to like the systems level and embedded systems domains, and those kind of have guided where my career trajectory has been for the past year. Other experiences at Yale that I had that were really formative. I mean, I mentioned robotics in high school, but I also stayed in touch with that through FIRST at Yale, FAY, It's a alumni group that does volunteering and mentoring and coaching for FIRST robotics from Yale students. So if you've had any prior experience with FIRST or even haven't and just want to get involved with it, I recommend that. It's a great group. And then a big part of my Yale experience was definitely research that I did. I don't know that I ever really like intentionally. I've never had a mindset of pursuing grad school. I mean, maybe in the future at some point. So I was never super set on doing a ton of research and getting published and all that. But I took Jakob Scheffer's, I think it was 201, 202, the like the intro to I forget what the title is, but like the class where they show you FPGAs and Verilog. I was like, wow, this is really cool. You know, you can basically code computer architecture. And so I got involved with his group, the Computer Architecture and Security Laboratory, CAS Lab. And that's kind of where I picked up an FPGA skill set, which I can speak to is also a very interesting domain, like Annika was saying. And along with that, for my thesis senior year, I did some research with Robert Slay and Rajat Manohar, more on like an architectural level. We designed a accelerator for network serialization. It's pretty in the weeds stuff, but basically just, you know, hardware acceleration and like offloaded compute. Just like one of the topics that Hennessy and Patterson talk a lot about in their in that classic paper, the golden age of computer architecture. Also 10 out of 10 recommend that. There's some good talks from Hennessy and Patterson also just on YouTube if you want to watch them talk about it. They're great presenters.
Yeah.
So finally, I think somebody's not liking here. Not sure. But yeah, so then one last experience that kind of transitioned me into career after Yale was my internship after my sophomore year, actually. COVID kind of messed up the one after my junior year. But after my sophomore year, I interned as a systems software intern at NVIDIA. I'm not going to bash on large companies. Like I had a good time, but I also felt the size of the company. You know, NVIDIA is not even as big as Apple or Microsoft, but it's still like, I think 15,000 employees. And I had a great time. I really liked the systems I worked on. We were doing software for like self-driving vehicles. But I think I felt that at least for the time being, I wanted to try out some smaller environments and went towards startups. So hopefully I can provide some side of like the startup world there. So after graduating last May, through a Yale professor, actually, I got my first job. That was a great class too. It's called Computer Architecture for AI. It's like specifically going through the history of architectures tailored to AI. It's taught by Rich Lethen. Professor Lethen's a great guy, and he hooked me up with his friend from college who was running a robotics startup in Cambridge called Humatics. So at Humatics, I was an embedded systems engineer. I wanted to straddle the line kind of between software and hardware. That's at least what I was intended to do. I ended up kind of mostly essentially being an FPGA engineer. Which is, you know, is great. I do love FPGAs, but like from a career growth perspective, I decided to pursue more of a software opportunity after 9 months there. So now I'm with my current employer, Anduril. We're a defense startup based out of Orange County, California. But it's a startup, but it's Series D, and there's 1,000 employees. So there's offices in Boston and DC and Seattle. I'd recommend you check them out if you're at all interested in that space. I am a software engineer, but what I do really like about my current position is that I'm very hands-on. Like a day in the life for me is very intimate with the hardware that we deploy. You also get to travel to like customer demos a lot. And I've been having a really great experience here so far. Just to give you guys an idea of the system that I work on, I'm going to share a video. Do you guys see the YouTube? I can't see Zoom, so I don't know. Can somebody say something?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, you're all good.
Awesome. Oh, I don't know if I checked optimize for video. Let me do that quickly. Okay, sweet. Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that up to give you guys an idea what I work on. Specifically, I'm a sensor integration engineer on that project. So as we find new use cases, different customers need different sensors. I integrate those into the system. Like I was saying, it's really nice to work with something that's very physical and hands-on. I'm often working with those towers, like plugged into boards and looking at signals. And I feel like it's pretty impactful line of work that I feel good about. So that's my day in the life. Happy to take any questions on startups, especially kind of moving between hardware and software or Anduril. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think a big round of applause. Bill, Onika, and Adam, if you can hear me, like that was really great. Like, I was just so mesmerized by what everybody spoke. So without further ado, I think we will move on to the next session, the panel session. And I think Russell and Daniel are going to moderate the panel. Daniel will be our Zoom observer and Russell the in-person observer. And yeah, guys, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you everybody again for those, for sharing your experiences. It was super cool to hear from everybody, especially like people at different career points and how your experience at Yale like affected your careers. So Danielle and I are now going to move into the panel session. So we have one question to start, and then we'll take some questions from the audience and from the audience on Zoom. So if you have any questions, please start thinking of questions. Okay, so our first question for anybody to answer is, I guess this is more for Annika and for William, but when choosing grad school versus industry after undergrad, what are some factors that you considered?
Maybe I'll take a swing and then Annika can correct me. When I finished up at Yale, I was genuinely on the fence about grad school. I had a really good undergrad research experience with Rob Schilkopf in applied physics, and was really into quantum computing. Like I was like, that's my passion, that's my calling. And I even ended up at ETH Zurich, working as a technician, preparing to apply for a physics PhD there, a year later after teaching. In the end, I realized that like I just didn't have, at that time, I didn't have the commitment and sort of passion that I needed to see it through. Like a PhD is a long slog, in my opinion, and you have to really want to do it. You will get paid more in industry. Like people say that you're going to earn back your salary, like you're not. Just to be very honest with you, it can't be the reason you do it. You have to do it because you actually want to. You're excited about the technology or the research or something else. I think that the tangible skills you pick up are definitely kind of help you in a very long-term way. And I wouldn't change my mind, but I wasn't honestly ready to go to grad school until 4 years later. Like I had been working as an entry-level engineer for quite a while at a really small, like a 40-person company, literally turning wrenches and building test stands. I was doing, just like Annika, I was doing part-time classes for a couple of years, like kind of building the skill set and like kind of seeing that greater world. It wasn't until I really, really knew what I wanted and what I wanted to get out of it that I would recommend grad school. Because if you don't, it's a lot of time. It just points you down a path you're not ready to go down yet. But if you are, I mean, it opens so many doors, and it's a great thing to do if you kind of know the time is right.
I actually would have to agree with a lot of what William has said. I think grad school really is, especially a PhD path, it is a big commitment. And you do have to be very certain of what you're going into. That said, I do think, so I work with a lot of people who did choose to go get the PhD math like immediately after college. And I think that there are definitely, benefits with that. I think that the earlier you find something that you want to go deep into, it really helps. But at the same time, I think for me, the reason I chose not to was because well, first of all, I did want to, the idea of having the job, making money, that is really helpful, in your life to go ahead and do that, to earn that money. And then I think we also, you learn a lot in industry. I learned a complete, like a skill set that you can't learn anywhere else. It was a combination of engineering, real life engineering, communication skills, and how supply chains work, and just how things get made in real life. And I think for me, it was always about, am I learning something really interesting and cool? And I think there's lots of ways to get that experience. So for me, it made sense. And then I later found something that I wanted to go deep in. And so then, at that point, grad school did make sense to me. But yeah, I think it's really a personal decision.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. Actually, as a follow-up for Annika, like I imagine it's really difficult to like balance going to work and then doing like a graduate degree part-time. Like, do you have any thoughts on that, or like advice for students who are thinking like if they want to go directly to grad school or maybe go work and do grad school part-time?
Yeah, I'd actually say sometimes I get folks at work even that ask me, should I do the part-time grad school? I think you should have a clear purpose, because it's a lot of work, and you want to go into the program feeling confident. We know when things do get hard, because it's hard just switching your attention and diving really deep into two different things. Just have a clear purpose on why you're doing it, and that will help you get through and feel good about the experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Did anybody in the audience here or on Zoom have any questions?
Yes, I believe we have some questions from the Zoom. We have a few from Eliza, but I guess maybe we'll start with just the first block. So the first is, do large companies encourage specialization? Is moving between group projects easy? And how is this different for startups?
Do you want that one, Annika? I'm happy to have a shot at it, but maybe you want to go.
Actually, I think we might even have different perspectives on it. So I'm happy to kind of give my own perspective on it.
Please.
I think it depends on what you want. I actually don't think that they encourage it one way or another. I see some people who go into something that I consider a little bit less specialized, which is maybe like a program management. There's a core set of skills. Maybe there's a specialized set of skills, but you have a lot of flexibility to go to different groups and try that out. And there are some people that do really like becoming more specialized, and you become more of a master, and then that helps you move up in the company in a different way. So I think that's actually, for me, that's one of the benefit of large companies, is that they do provide a lot of different opportunities, and you can do either one. I did not personally find it difficult to move between groups and projects too. Like, even if you're on the same job, you sometimes move between projects, which I did a lot in my first job. And so it was very easy, and there was always something cool to work on. And yeah, that's my own take on it.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I think maybe it's worth like pushing a little on the word specialization, because when I hear that, I think of technical specialization. Like I work on, battery materials or FPGAs or whatever the like specific core knowledge area is. I actually think that just like Annika said, like there are definitely tracks at large companies where you become like the person who does that thing, and you know more about it than anyone else, and like every other conceivable thing you have to do is taken care of by somebody else. Like that exists at large companies in a way that maybe it doesn't at small companies, because at small companies, like somebody still has to hire the crater or whatever it is that they have to do. But like I said, like there's a lot of different ways through a large company. There's, as she says, there's project management, there's people management, there's you kind of pulling together a little bit of all of those things. I think that the one thing you do specialize at a large company is like being a person at that large company. There's like ways of communicating within a certain culture that you get kind of comfortable with. One thing I would note is that like the first year after my PhD, I worked at a scientific consulting firm called Exponent. Great company, and I had a fantastic time there. I would note that the recruiting pitch for them was always like, don't specialize, like, get a broad variety of experiences, which you do. But I wanted to be clear that you do specialize at doing a certain kind of thing within those broad range of experiences. So I'd say that specialization is a multidimensional word. And it kind of, maybe that's kind of I'm a cop-out answer, but you want to be a little bit careful about how you define that one. I think it really depends on what's important to you.
Yeah, and I think just to add like the kind of startup perspective to that, I think in startups as well, it's definitely easy to become, the person that knows that thing and everybody goes to you for that. I think it's harder then to escape that internally, because I mean, one, obviously the company's smaller, there's probably less groups and projects to transfer to, but there's also just less people in a given role that could like take over for that. You definitely, so like you end up technically specialized, but then you also often have a lot of insight and interactions into other parts of the process. Like at my last position, I was an FPGA engineer, but I was still meeting with like product managers every week and then being kept up to date on like the whole product life cycle. So you get to specialize technically, but then also be involved with much of the rest of the company.
Awesome, thank you so much. Next, we'll take a question or some questions from the audience. Ready? Yep.
I've actually got a question for you, Will, if that's all right. So you said that undergrad you studied physics, but then for graduate school you did mechanical engineering. I've heard from people that like it can be hard to pivot educationally away from what you studied undergrad, but that's exactly what you did. Did you have any trouble doing that?
No, I didn't. You're not the first person to ask me that. The truth is, I think that particularly coming from a field, I mean, I was not an EE, full disclosure, I'm like the black sheep in the room here, but I think coming from a challenging field like EE, where you have to handle kind of complex math or, kind of more complicated systems, you may not have heard of like the XYZ equation, or like, there might be a field, you're like, what's that field? But like, go to Wikipedia, literally, or buy a textbook, like you will learn it. The truth is that like 4 years, your career is actually very long relative to 4 years at Yale studying your major, of which realistically only half is actually your major, right? So I wouldn't be afraid of any particular subject matter. Like you guys you're smart and you've done hard work at Yale. Like you will learn what you need to learn. That's like the rate at which you learn is way more important than what you picked up in the last couple of years, in my opinion.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else from the audience have anything they want to ask? Either for a specific.
There is a question. Oh, sorry, Russell. There is a question from Zoom. I don't know if there's anybody from the live audience that has one. But Elijah, maybe we will come back to one of your questions. But Eugene had one. What are some tips to help make the most out of an internship?
I'm happy to kind of take a stab at that one. For me, I think network, especially if you do happen to intern in a large company, there's a lot of different people. And if an internship is just like a trial, and if you find a group that you think is more interesting, you can talk to them. And then maybe if you decide to come back full time, you can go work on their group. So that would be my probably number one tip, is just talk to a lot of people. Realistically, I think you should try to contribute as much as you can during your 3 months, but 3 months is not that long. So you're going to get the most benefit by being introduced to their culture, and then, finding how you're going to be able to contribute value long-term to that company.
I would also say, like, especially if you're at a large company, don't be afraid to just, I guess kind of networking, but really, like, truly, don't be afraid to just go to other teams and ask them about what they're working on, or like browse through the company wiki and look at other stuff. Like when I was at NVIDIA, I was on the self-driving team, but I love video games, and NVIDIA obviously has a lot of stuff in the video game market. So it was cool just to like go through and see all these new projects that are going on. Like before the Switch was announced, we were seeing that, and just like, just have fun with it and explore the entire company. Like maybe there's stuff on the totally other side of the company that would interest you.
Just to agree with what Adam and Annika said, it's been a long time since I've had an internship, but when people come through my group, the thing I tell them is that being an intern, it's like having a golden ticket. Like people will open their office doors to you and make time for you in a way that they won't for anyone else in the company. Like I could email that person and I'll be like, oh, I'm the head of the such and such group. They'd be like, who is this guy? But if you're an intern, it's totally different. They'll make time for you. You won't know it until it's gone, but you should take advantage of it when you have it. It's really important.
Okay, awesome. Again, I will solicit questions from the audience if anybody has anything to ask, or we have some more questions coming in from Zoom. Anybody? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess going back to a previous question in the chat.
We'll get back to you.
Okay. Sorry, if somebody else wants to from the live audience wants to go, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So like most of the professors I talk to tell me if I go to, because I'm kind of on the fence about getting a PhD. So they tell me like, if you go to industry, you're gonna get bored after like a year. So what do you guys have to say about that? Do you like ever see yourselves getting bored at your current job in the future? Or are you always like kind of learning new things and like staying engaged?
I guess oh, sorry, Monica, were you gonna say something? No. One thing I would say is like, it's less cut and dry, black and white, like industry versus academia than you might think. Like there's kind of a continuum you can be on. Like you could be in some massive production software organization that is purely devoted to maintaining some, cloud product with tiny little incremental updates. Or you could, be doing a PhD and be like the one person in the world that's an expert on some topic. But like, there's a lot of middle ground between that, there's R&D groups inside large companies. There's startups that are working on brand new tech and trying to productize it. So, you know, it's not as much just industry versus academia. It's there's plenty of places in both where you could get bored or you could find something that's really cutting edge and exciting. So I would say, you know, just know what you're interested in and look for opportunities to do that. And I think you should be able to find them.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say, you know, it's been what, 7 years since I finished my PhD. I'm not bored. I'll say that. Like, I may not, you know, I may not stay at Apple forever, but you know, I think exactly as Adam said, it is a continuum. I think that there are pros and cons both ways. One thing I've heard that's a pro for academia is that you can choose your research path. No one's going to tell you to go work on X, whereas we're all, you know, we're supported by our companies to work on whatever we work on. For me, that's not a problem, because if I was going to start a research lab, it would be doing what I do at Apple. What's awesome at Apple is that I say, hey, I want $5 million because I want this really cool machine in this special room. And they're like, cool, that makes sense. Like, it's not, I'm not going to spend, you know, another year writing grants to get the funding. So it's pros and cons. I wouldn't, we have this is an industrial panel. So we would all be speaking out of our element to talk about life as a professor. But I would certainly say that for me, in industry, it's been very rewarding. And for my friends who've gone on to do academic careers, like, that's very rewarding too. We just have made different trade-offs. But I think industry can be every bit as dynamic and changing as academia. You're not, just like Adam said, you don't have to be in like a build and release cycle where it's always the same thing. It can be a very much an R&D focused effort.
Yeah, I very much agree with what has been said. I would say the best way to make sure that you don't get bored is just have a career plan and make sure you're moving forward, live your purpose, and make sure you're working on problems that interest you. And there's a lot of room for that in companies, no matter what size. I wouldn't say it's boring at all.
Thank you, everyone. Danielle, do you want to continue?
So I think that the previous question in the chat might have been answered a bit already. It was, how important is a master's or a PhD degree in looking for jobs in EECS? Is it possible to substitute a degree with work experience in the company? If you have any other thoughts, feel free to, you know, to jump in. But yeah.
From my experience, it depends on what job you're looking at. For my first job, it was not something they wanted or needed. In my current role, it's a little bit more technically specialized, and so they like it when they can find people with you know, master's degrees. So I would say it depends on the level of specifically technical specialization that you're looking for. I have also seen people have successful technical careers though without the master's degree or PhD. So it really just depends on what group you get into.
One thing I think it does help with, and to be honest, I'm kind of deleting the EECS part of this because I think this applies too for other engineering degrees, but it shows that you can learn, and it shows that you can communicate to a certain level, and it shows that you can pick up a new area that you didn't previously know. So if you've already demonstrated a skill, then I don't think you need it, because you're like, yeah, I know how to do this. But if it is a job that requires you to move into new fields or pick up new skills, it's a good validation point. So I think, you know, just like Annika said, there's certain roles where it's kind of expected.
I will say recently, just with my experience of applying out of undergrad and then also recently job hopping, it just seemed in general like bigger companies tended to be more focused on academic credentials. Whereas startups were more lenient, like, oh, maybe we wanted a guy with a master's or PhD for this, but you know, it's fine. It seems like you can learn. So definitely the being able to learn part. That's, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. As we kind of move towards, oh yeah, Ruthie.
I guess I have a question for Dr. Do you think, since you have a business bachelor's, do you think you could have as easily gotten like a job after undergrad if you, like in industry, if you hadn't tried, if you hadn't?
I had a little trouble with the audio, but just to read it back to make sure I heard it, you were asking if you think I would have had a tough time getting a job out of undergrad with just a physics degree. Was that right?
Yes. I guess.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually, I have a good story about that. After I finished working at ETH Zurich and sort of decided that, grad school was not for me at the time, I moved back to Boston and I literally went on Craigslist. Like when people ask about advice about resume preparation and sort of job searching, like I'm not the guy to ask. Annika and Adam are way better at that than I am. But this is how I landed like my first job. And the guy's like, okay, physics, you're probably smart. Can you do anything with your hands? Like we really need an engineer, but there's no engineers around. And for me, it was literally that I'd rebuilt the carburetors on my motorcycle that summer. And he's like, okay, he can probably pick it up. So the short answer is I think that physics was not an easy degree to get a industrial job at an undergraduate level with. On the other hand, everything I saw later, like when I'm doing graduate level fluid mechanics courses, like the math is easy, it's very easy to understand. And it kind of served me well all the way through, whether it was fluid mechanics or battery dynamics or whatever it was, like as a core skill set, I would say it's a really strong one. I think EE and CS is probably in the same vein.
Awesome, thank you, Will. We also wanted to ask, as we kind of move towards the end of this panel, about everybody's philosophy on work-life balance, and specifically about how your experience at Yale might have shaped that. I think Annika mentioned earlier the idea of like ikigai, like finding meaning in the work that you do.
Yeah, actually, I read a book recently that influenced how I think about, quote unquote, work-life balance. And I'm trying to remember the phrase she used for it. The book is called Unapologetically Ambitious. It's by Shelley Archambault. Really cool book. I really recommend that one, especially if you're really early in career. And I think the way she talked about it was that balance implies that there are two things to be balanced. They're opposites almost. But she talked a lot about how it's not just about balance, it's about integration. I think that was the word she used, is work-life integration. So she gave a lot of examples on, well, hey, something I need to do for life is to work out. Okay, I'm gonna have some walking meetings. Or I think that flexibility is even, improved now that we do a lot of, remote hybrid. This is something increasingly that a lot of technology companies are doing. So I would say on work-life balance, I think it is important to find your purpose and make sure that what you do for work you really enjoy. And just try to think about it from more of an integration standpoint.
Those are awesome points, Annika. I'm really glad that you mentioned this one. I think it's a really important topic, and it's, to be blunt, like I think it's a little bit dangerous. Like I think that this is the easiest way for you to have a kind of a bad experience through your career. Because companies aren't looking after the whole you. That's your job. Now, Yale may have changed since I was there, but when I was at Yale, everybody was multitasking a million things. You were in your a cappella group and you were racing on the cycling team and you were doing like a million extra classes, and everyone was doing everything and you were juggling it. And I got a real kick out of it when I was at Yale, to just see how much I could get away with. How much could I carry? Could I make that the 38 credit load or whatever it was? And yes, it's cool to have been able to do that. And I guess sometimes it helps me out now too. But I think that in my career, I've been happiest and most successful when I kind of clear out all the clutter and pick one or two or three things. And I'm like, this is what's important to me. When you were maybe this is, I'm interested to hear what Adam says here, because maybe this is a large company, small company thing. But for me at Apple, the times I'm successful, it's because I say, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to get both feet under me and do it the very best I can possibly do. And nobody cares about like the fact that I had 80 emails to write that morning. That's not important. What matters is like this meeting right here where I present this piece of work, it has to be as good as it can be. To be blunt, I think Yale does a really bad job of teaching undergrads about that. It's always about multitasking at Yale. I think that in a company, at some point, you have to be about focus. I also mentioned in my bio, I have 3 young kids. I think that kind of ties into it. For me, family always comes first, like just to be honest. And I tell my employees that, I tell my managers that, like, you have to know what's important to you. And people don't talk about how you balance family with work when you're in your early career, because it's all work, and that's good. I'm pushing 40. For me now, it's a balance, and suddenly that can become extremely important. If you want to do cell development, that means working with companies in China. That means being on the phone from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. every day. Like, what does that mean for bath time with your kid, or whatever the thing is that's important to you? Like, you have to consider all of these prioritizations. And I think that no one will do it for you. Like, if you keep on taking on responsibilities, people will be happy about that. So you have to know how to draw the line for yourself.
Yeah, to kind of answer the large company, small company thing. I feel like generally, at least in similar positions, you're going to do a similar amount of engineering. It's how much like process and meetings and interaction there is tied up in that. And that's kind of the one thing that small companies can be good at. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes small companies are bad at this too. But often you can get a lot of more just heads down time. And because you tend to own more personally, like, in a large company, you probably have more people you're directly collaborating with. It can be easier to get more heads down time in a small company. I also wanted to say, kind of on the transition from the contrast between time management at Yale and after. I felt like a really just like massive relief kind of graduating, not because I hated Yale, I loved Yale, but like William was saying, was that there was, I was on a varsity team and I was doing all this research, and there's like all this stuff you're trying to juggle. And it's hard to get that time to focus on a specific task. Like, there's a million different groups that want something from you. There's 5 classes you're taking that you're trying to juggle. When you work, it's your job, and you have a solid block of time every day to work on it. And there's probably some meetings that you have to work around, and that's annoying. But like, generally, it's good. It's a lot easier than in college, I feel like. At least, I mean, I'm a lowly, like, entry-level individual contributor, so I don't have as many meetings probably as William does managing people. And but like, as that individual contributor, like, you can get a lot of really focused, productive time. And the other thing is, like, even if your work-life balance in terms of like raw hours isn't that good, it tends to be that in tech you can get away with like there's a lot of flexibility. One of the people on my team comes in at 7 and leaves at 4, and another comes in at like 11 and leaves at 7. So like there's flexibility to shape it around your life and your priorities. I think like it's there's no market hours that you're chained to. It's a pretty flexible field in general.
I actually want to give a shout out for the prioritization idea too. I actually, whenever people ask me about, even the undergraduate experience, I always recommend take the classes you need. Do not overburden your schedule. So I think throughout my time at Yale, I don't remember how many times if I ever took 5 classes at a time, but like take just like few classes, don't stretch yourself at extracurriculars. I just think that the prioritization, and especially in a big company, if you want to get something done, you really have to prioritize. I actually big +1 to that.
Great, thank you so much for your philosophies and for your wisdom. Did anybody have any last questions before we wrap up? Yep.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, and I came in sort of halfway through your intro bios, so I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but do you love what you do right now? If so, why? If not, why not? Yeah, I guess I sort of want to hear more about like motivations and what gets you up in the day. Good job.
I'll start. I do. I love what I do. To be honest, some days I don't believe that I get like that I'm paid to do the job that I do. And for me, it's about working with people who are so much smarter than I am and so much more skilled than I am in all of these different things. Like I get to sit in these meetings and hear from these amazing people about work they've done. Like my brain is tired at the end of the day in a really good way. For me, that's a huge reward. The other thing for me is, and this is another big company, small company thing, but like I'm proud of the work my company does. Maybe a day-to-day bureaucracy can be painful, but like I want to ship something awesome and I want it to impact the world. And so when you get really good people working on a thing that you believe is a good idea, that's like the space that I want to work in, and that's what I find. And so yeah, I love my job.
Yeah, I also must say I really love what I do. Day just to get to work with so many really smart people, and being able to, I think it's kind of, for me, goes back to purpose. If my own personal motivation and purpose is enabling humanity to discover more knowledge, I think that in itself is just such a valuable thing, and I'm so lucky to be able to contribute to that. That's what I always go back to, and yeah, I absolutely love my job.
I also would say that I love my job. I would definitely like to reiterate something William said. Like probably the biggest part of that is working with just brilliant people. And I think large companies do a pretty good job of like making sure that the talent bar is pretty high, and generally, there's like established processes. I would say at startups, that's something, if you're looking to go into startups, definitely get a sense for where the talent bar is within a certain company. I found that it's just way more rewarding if you can find a team that's just like jam packed of geniuses, and everybody's smarter than you, and like that's the way to learn the most and have the most rewarding job. And I would just say, like, specifically with Anduril, I do find like that working on physical systems that protect people is really rewarding. And I like building a system. I could be out there like selling ads or like optimizing some system to like keep you on a social media app longer. But I really think that working with a system that you find personally rewarding is really important.
Well, thank you. It was awesome to be able to hear from all three of you about your personal life, your work life, about engineering. Can we get a round of applause for all three of the panelists? Thank you so much for your time. And Professor Panda will close with some remarks.
Yeah, I just want to say again, thank you so much, everybody. This has been really wonderful. Cannot thank the audience, the panelists for the time. I just want to add, there was no academician here. I myself am an EE undergraduate, graduate, and an academician in EE. So yes, life is rewarding. And definitely, I think more and more, I think the dynamism and the so-called story about industry can be boring and academia is more challenging. It's kind of changing what was perceived, it's very right that more and more academia works alongside the industry right now. The kind of research we do, there's a lot of AI related research, there's a lot of space related research and everything. So, research has become so dynamic right now that the lines are kind of blurring. So the only extra advantage that I get to teach you, I get to learn from you, from these brilliant minds that will probably go ahead and make another company like Apple tomorrow. So yeah, that's been wonderful. But again, coming back, Will, Adam and Onika, thank you so very much for this. This has been a wonderful second edition of the seminar. We hope that we can continue this, and the students will hopefully participate. The students will have hopefully learned from this. Before everybody goes, there's a lot of pizza and drinks and refreshments out there. Please grab your a pizza or something. And yes, maybe that's all for today. And thank you again, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all for the invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.